Can mediators be neutral? Part of the series, Communication Skills with Daniel Rainey. This is our topic for today.
Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and podcast by instantmediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact dependent.
Hello and welcome, everybody. I am Natalia Orłowska-Czajka, advocate, mediator, and arbitrator from Warsaw, Poland.
And hi, I'm Mac Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas.
Daniel Rainey, various types of dispute resolution through Holistic Solutions Incorporated.
We are meeting today to discuss a topic that seems so obvious, but then we are to prove that it is not. Can mediators be neutral? Every single mediation course, every single mediator's speech will be focusing on the fact that mediators are neutral. But are they really? Dan, you first. What do you think about it? Are they neutral?
No, can't be.
Why?
Well, I've often said that if you are at the table with two parties who have an issue with which they are emotionally involved, that matters to them in their lives, and where it's important to them, and you are truly neutral, that is, you do not have an opinion about that issue, you don't react to that issue at all. If you are truly neutral, then you have a mental illness, because you as a third party are a human being, and you are going to have reactions to, you're going to have opinions about, and you're going to be relating to the issue that's on the table in some way, because you can't help it, because you're a human being. So I don't like the term neutral. I understand that it's used advisedly, and I get that, but I really don't like the term neutral. But I think what I would say categorically is that it's impossible to be a neutral influence in a mediation session as the third party.
So it's impossible to be a neutral influence? That's
right. I mean, basically, just think about just the dynamics, the group dynamics of it. So just take the simplest mediation where there are two parties, one on each side of the table, and a third party. If those two parties are by themselves and they're trying to talk about their issue, there's a certain dynamic there. And probably the reason they came to you in the first place is that they're having trouble talking to one another. They're having trouble getting past their differences. And so you're taking an environment where there are two individuals who are trying to talk directly to one another, and you're inserting yourself into it. That by definition changes the dynamic of that situation. It's different than when you weren't there. So you're not a neutral influence from the very beginning. From the moment you step in the room, you begin to have an influence. And my fear is that if you think, oh, I'm going to be neutral, I'm not going to have an influence here, then you will ignore the ways that you are having an influence, and you won't handle those influences that you have in a way that is not detrimental to one party or the other. So I say flippantly, I say, no, you can't be neutral. But I really mean you can't be a neutral influence, and you'd better understand the influence that you have when you're there.
okay.
So,
Let me follow up real quick.
Mhm.
So when we discuss neutrality and mediation, and for everybody who's listening or watching out there may be multiple things that we mean. Okay. So when I'm discussing neutrality and what I was trained on by all the different mediator trainers and all the speakers I've listened to, the books I've read that discuss this, I think one of the big focuses is on helping people trust the process, that people will feel more comfortable and more likely to want to reach an agreement with their opposition if they feel that the mediator who is helping them have their conversation and facilitating the dialogue, if the mediator is neutral in the sense that they don't take a side, they will remain objective to the degree that they can, and their job is to help the parties themselves reach an agreement. Now, am I too far? from what you were
No,
saying,
no,
or was that
no, I
two
understand
different things?
exactly what you're saying. I think for me, the idea of neutrality is, I think it's a trap. Thinking about being neutral, I think, is a trap that leads us someplace we don't want to go. But the notion of of operating in a way that doesn't disadvantage either party and which advantages the parties together. That's really what I would focus on, as opposed to being neutral. For just as, and maybe maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but for example, if the two of you are my clients, we're sitting at the table, and it's a divorce mediation, and Natalia has been physically abusive toward you, Mac. I mean, she beats you up. Then I don't think I could sit in that room and not have an opinion about whether or not that's okay. Even if both of you said it's okay, Max says, I really don't mind that she punches me out every now and then. I don't think I can be in that room and not have an opinion about that. What I can do is I can be in that room and not do anything that disadvantages you or her in your conversation. I can advantage the situation so that you can talk about that in a way that works for the two of you without saying, "Oh, it's okay. I'm neutral." I'm not neutral. I have an opinion. I have a strong opinion about that. But my job here is to advantage both of you and not disadvantage either of you. Trust is certainly part of that, but also understanding process is part of that. We talked in another podcast about environment and how important the environment is. I mean, really, when you talk about neutrality, what you're talking about is creating an environment where the parties don't feel that you're advantaging either one of them, that you're letting them be who they are, and you're advantaging the process and the situation, not an individual.
So, practically, is neutrality then just a slogan? Is it an empty word? Or is it something about um, making the parties safe where they are and making them um, feel as good as it is only possible within the situation of a conflict?
Yeah, I don't think it's an empty word. I think it's the word that we have chosen as third parties to describe this process that I talked about in terms of making the parties feel safe, making and having the parties trust the instincts and the behavior of the third party. So I don't think it's an empty term at all. The only reason I react negatively to it at all is that if we really think that we can be a non-issue, that we can be a totally neutral party and a totally neutral influence, then I think that's just basically wrong. I don't think we can do that. And I think if we admit that we can't really do that, we can use the term neutral all we want to. But if by using that term we mean I want to behave in a way that is advantageous to the parties and doesn't harm anyone, I'm fine with that. And if we want to use that term to mean that, that's okay. I'm afraid there are some people who actually think they can be neutral. And that I think is a problem.
So, Dan, what do you think the problem becomes? Like, what are the dangers when people do believe this, mediators do believe this, and then they go out to try to help people resolve their disputes?
Well, so Mac, I'll just ask you, if you were completely neutral, totally without feeling about the situation one way or another, completely at ease with both parties, um, what would that mean for the way you behave? How would that guide your behavior?
Well, I'm, I guess the example that just came up was the one where Natalia is beating me up. If that mediator is neutral and they don't see how that action is wrong, then yeah, that might, you know, uh, I guess negatively influence the outcome of a situation because I might let some kind of, evil, be promoted, right? By not, I guess, stepping in. But we have self determination as well in mediation. And so we want people to be the deciders of their fate when it comes to the outcome. So I guess I'm a little torn about it. On one hand, the mediator should just not promote anything and help the parties, just facilitate. But on the other hand, you don't want somebody to suffer, certainly, or have a negative outcome that's so egregious and so wrong. So this is, I guess, I can't answer the question. It's gonna there might be two contradictory conclusions that I
Uh,
reach.
well, maybe I chose a bad example, but I'll go with it a little bit further.
Hmm.
So if I'm the third party and we're there, and Natalia's been beating you up and abusing you, and the result of that is that you're reluctant to say out loud what you think in the mediation, that you're scared, you're frightened, and you withdraw, and you don't feel that you can participate fully in the same way that she can, that she's dominating or would like to dominate the situation. Um, as a third party, what I would do, and there may be people who would criticize me for this, I would do some of the things that I had in my toolbox that would allow me to make you feel safer. I would ask you questions in a certain way that might make you feel more secure in answering them. I might be very direct with Natalia, and I wouldn't use these words, but I might, in essence, tell her to shut up for a while and let you talk. So I might very well lean toward you in terms of my behavior to draw you out and allow you to say the things that you want to say, and so that I'm treating you differently than I'm treating her. Now, does that mean I'm neutral? I don't think it means I'm neutral. I think what it means is that I'm trying not to disadvantage you by the way the process is being run. And so again, the term neutrality has a lot of meanings to a lot of different people. The reason I react unfavorably toward it is the connotation that I'm going to treat both of you exactly the same way, that I'm going to handle the situation in an equitable way, an equitable meaning that I'm going to treat you both exactly the same way. I probably won't treat you both exactly the same way, because if I did that, that might in fact be disadvantaging one of you. And so the decisions that I make about how I deal with you, I think don't have to go to neutrality. They have to go with fairness and your trust in my ability to handle the situation.
Okay, yeah. Say that last part again. You had mentioned if I am not, interjecting myself, I that might lead to unfairness,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If Natalia says, okay, the way we're going to resolve this is that I'm only going to beat you up once a week,
Hmm.
you don't feel that you can confront that, and you simply say, well, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to let that slide as a third party. I'm going to ask you, well, why is that fine? Is it really fine with you? What is the implication of that, Natalia? Why only once a week? I may not suggest to you that you do something different, but I will certainly begin to ask questions that will allow you the opportunity to express how you really feel about that situation. I don't think that's neutral. I think it's fair, and I think it's appropriate, and I think it's not disadvantaging Natalia, but it's advantaging you, or giving you an equal advantage. And so I don't have a problem with that. And again, I'm sure there are mediators out there who would disagree with me about this altogether. But to me, the idea of how I deal with you has to do with how the environment that I create that allows you to honestly exchange information and get what you think is right on the table. Whether you agree about that or not between the two of you is an irrelevant matter to me. But I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to say what you want to say in the way that you want to say it and feel safe doing
So the word
that. And that
fairness
may
within.
mean that I treat you a little differently than I treat her.
No, I understand. So instead of you telling people that you're neutral, you might then tell parties who come to you that you're a mediator and that you are fair. So people walk away feeling that you are fair to them.
Right. And in some ways, that to say that I'm fair implies that I have an active role in the outcome. If I'm an arbitrator, I certainly want you to think I'm fair. Um, what I want you to think, if you come to me as a third party, as a mediator, is I want you to think that I will approach that situation in a way that is allowing all the parties to talk to one another in a civil way that surfaces the issues as they want to surface them. And so it's not so much a matter of being fair. Maybe that's a good term. I don't know, but I really think about it more as you can trust me to run the process in a way that is not going to disadvantage you. If I can get them to think that I am going to run that process in a way that doesn't disadvantage them, then I think that's the place I want to start. And sometimes that will mean that they'll turn to you if they build that trust. They'll turn to you and say, "What do you think?" And there are some situations in which I think that's appropriate, but I would want to know that on the front end. I used to do a lot of work in an environment where the parties wanted you to have an opinion as a third party. And I knew that on the front end. They knew it on the front end. Everybody was okay with that. And so, when I go into caucus with them and tell one party, you're crazy, you're never going to get that. That's insane. You shouldn't be asking that. That's not being neutral, but it's fulfilling the function they wanted me to fulfill. And they say, oh, okay, I respect your opinion. We may reject it, but I respect your opinion. And I ask for it. And so there's lots of different ways that you can behave. What I want the parties to understand is I'm not going to do anything to hurt you. I'm going to do everything I can to help you, but I'm not going to do anything to hurt you.
So when we are having the opening statements here, and the way we are trained in my jurisdiction is that we express that in both platforms, meaning we are neutral in terms of you as the parties, meaning I don't know you, I have no previous experience with you, I don't know anything else, then you will tell me here during the mediation. But we also say, I'm neutral in terms to the merits of this case. I don't have any interest in either of you winning or losing, or either of you getting a specific resolution of what you brought to me today. And this is how we more or less try to express ourselves. But listening to what you've been saying, apart from the fact that I am not going to beat Mac, okay? I think that, and I've never done that. I want to assure and make sure that what you are warning the mediators about is that they can't be indifferent, right?
Yes, I think if you're a human being, you are probably going to have feelings about the things that you're hearing. And you should guard against letting those feelings guide your behavior in a way that advantages one party over another. But I think, to me, I think most competent counselors would tell you that you acknowledge what you are and what you think. You don't deny it. You acknowledge it, and then you deal with the consequences of it. And if the consequences are good, that's great. If the consequences are bad, then maybe you change your behavior. But you acknowledge it. So again, going back to the divorce mediation thing, if I think you're a jerk, that doesn't mean that I have to do anything to harm you, because I'm not invested in the outcome. I'm invested in the process. I'm not invested in the outcome. So I can think you're a jerk and still operate effectively, and you create that process that allows the two of you to operate fairly together in the discussion. But it doesn't mean that I have to turn off my emotions, because I don't think as a human being I can do that.
I think this is a good topic overall because the question goes to the heart of, what do people believe a mediator's role is? Okay. Uh, Months ago, we had a podcast recording with, I think it was with Fran Brockstein. Now, it could have been a blog by hers on mediations.com, or an audio recording we did with her, where we discuss family violence and family cases. And I've just been thinking back while you guys were talking about some of the things that she would do as a mediator when one person stated they were a victim of family violence. First off, should you mediate such a case? Or should it just go to court? And if you do, what safeguards we put in place to make sure that the people are going to have a neutral playing field? And I hope I'm using that word correctly, because one of the things that I remember she's saying is parties come to the office, they strike a deal on custody and divorce, okay? And she, at the conclusion of the mediation, allows the man, the father, the husband, to leave first, get in his car and drive away. And then she would stay behind with the mom so that the mom could feel safe. And only when the other person had left, then she would go out. So, is this a good example of what we're talking about, where she knows that in one sense she's not neutral in that regard? Okay. The mediator, she herself wants to make sure that this person is not going to be harmed. But on the other side, she has to make sure she provides them a neutral platform to come have the discussion in different rooms and, communicate the differences and resolve something that they agree to, that they determine is fair for them. And then finally, when the mediation is about to be done, she doesn't just play the neutral card and just let them leave at the same time, not knowing if one might harm the other. She holds one back while the other one, proceeds to go out and drive away, and then she releases it. So to a degree, she is playing a role. She is interjecting herself, but she's being, I guess, right or righteous or fair in how she does it. Is that a good example of how we bring together all these different terms of neutrality and fairness?
I think so, because the underlying issue there is that she has an inkling that there might be damage or danger in a certain situation, so she doesn't let that situation occur. That's making a choice about the environment. And you could back this up and say, okay, I've got a situation where there's been violence in the family, so I'm not going to put them in the same room. I may put them in the same building and go from room to room and do shuttle diplomacy, or maybe I don't even put them in rooms at all. Maybe I do it online, or maybe there are choices that I can make on the front end that try to create that level playing field. Is not what I mean. They create that safe environment. And I'm making a judgment. It's not like I'm treating you both the same way. We're equal. We come to the same room. You talk about this like adults. I'm treating you equally. I have an opinion about whether or not there's a danger there, and then I act on that opinion. I try to create a fair environment for both parties based on what I perceive to be the dynamic between the two of them. So I think the idea of holding back and saying, okay, you don't go yet, wait till he leaves until you go is a good example of that. It's also a classic example of the conundrum that mediators are in. I mean, the parties walk out of the room, they've made an agreement. Whether they live up to that agreement is not within your control. And so if you've done your job well, and if you've created a good environment where they can really talk and understand one another, and they honestly make a deal that they both want to live with, chances are pretty good that will hold up. But you don't control that. They will do what they're going to do. And if you have a perception that one party is more likely than the other to be a problem afterwards, I think that's a legitimate perception, and it might color your behavior.
Which brings us to the conclusion not only of the conversation, but the entire podcast today. And thank you so much. I'm Dan. I think that the main purpose and reasons we've been going through this topic, can mediators be neutral, is to, again, wake up awareness that we are, as mediators, those who create the environment, those who set up the scene for what is going to happen, and then we facilitate the communication, which might mean that we need to ask more questions. Just be aware of the dynamics of what is happening. And
we tend to think about the difference between arbitration and mediation as being in arbitration, we give up our freedom to make a choice. The arbitrator makes a choice for us. And we tend to think about mediation as that place where, as Mac said, we have self-determination, we make our own choices. All I would suggest is that the behavior of the third party, while I'm not making a decision for you, can have an impact on what kind of decisions you make. And I should be aware of that.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. Until next time. Sorry, I was on mute for 30 seconds there. But signing off. Talk to you soon.